The captured stranger, the man woke up with the taste of dust in his mouth. His head ached, and his hands were tied tightly behind a wooden pole. The ground beneath him was hard and dry, and the air was filled with a strange smell of smoke and something cooking. He opened his eyes and saw figures moving around him. They were not human, tall, lean bodies covered in bronze-colored skin, with eyes that glowed faintly like embers in the dark. Some had markings painted on their faces, twisting lines and sharp symbols that seemed alive in the flickering firelight. The human, whose name was Jack, tried to speak, but the sound came out dry and cracked. The alien spoke in a language he didn't understand. Their voices deep and rhythmic, like chanting. They moved with purpose, carrying sticks, bowls, and bundles of herbs. Then he realized they were preparing for something. The smell in the air grew stronger. It was the smell of roasting meat, and in a flash, the truth hit him. They were planning to roast him alive. Jack's heart began to pound in his chest. He pulled at the ropes, but they were too tight. The crowd of aliens moved closer, their glowing eyes fixed on him. Some pointed at him and laughed, showing sharp teeth. Others beat drums, their rhythm echoing like a slow heartbeat through the night. The fire in the center of the village grew bigger. Its orange light painted the aliens' faces in dancing shadows. Jack felt like a trapped animal. Suddenly, the crowd parted. From the far side of the fire, a tall figure stepped forward. It was a woman, at least. She looked like one. Her skin was bronze like the others, but her features were softer. She wore long robes decorated with shimmering beads that caught the firelight. A tall headdress of feathers and silver threads rose above her head. Her eyes were bright gold, and they locked onto Jack's. The crowd went silent. Even the drums stopped. She walked slowly, every step graceful and full of authority. Jack could feel the weight of her presence. She was someone important. When she reached the fire, she raised her hand. Her voice rang out in the alien tongue, sharp and commanding. The warriors lowered their spears, and the crowd murmured in surprise. Jack had no idea what she was saying, but it was clear she was challenging the others. One of the older aliens, his skin covered in scars, stepped forward and argued with her. His voice was loud, his words full of anger. The woman did not back down. She spoke again, her tone calm but unshakable. Finally, the old alien spat on the ground and stepped back. The crowd shifted uneasily. Jack noticed that all eyes were now on her. She had just saved him, at least for now. The woman turned to look at him directly. Her golden eyes studied him with strange intensity. Jack felt an odd mix of fear and hope. She said something in her language, her voice softer this time. Then, to his shock, she leaned closer and whispered in broken English, "You. Not. Food." Jack blinked in disbelief. She could speak his language, at least a little. Before he could say anything, she straightened and addressed the crowd again. Her words were firm, and the aliens listened. Jack didn't know what was happening, but the ropes around his arms were not being cut. Instead, the warriors began to circle the fire again, preparing for something else. The woman, the priestess, as Jack guessed, turned to him one last time before stepping away. Her face was unreadable, but her eyes told him one thing. This was not over. If he wanted to survive the night, he would have to play whatever game she had just started. Somewhere deep inside, he knew she had a reason for saving him. But whether that reason would help him or destroy him, he could not yet tell. The drums started again, louder than before. The fire roared higher, sending sparks into the night sky. The shadows of the alien warriors stretched long and thin across the ground. Jack felt the heat on his face and the rope burning against his wrists. He had been pulled into something far bigger than himself, and in the center of it all stood the golden-eyed priestess, watching him with a look that could have been mercy or a warning. Asterisk, the priestess speaks. The night air was heavy with the scent of burning wood. The drums beat slowly, like a giant heart, filling the village with a tense rhythm. Jack's eyes followed the golden-eyed priestess as she moved gracefully toward the center of the gathering. Every alien's gaze was locked on her. She was not Just a figure of beauty, she was power itself, wrapped in feathers, beads, and flowing cloth. She raised her hand and the noise stopped instantly. Her voice carried across the open space, sharp and clear, even though Jack didn't understand. The words, he could feel the authority in them. The warriors, still holding their spears, shifted uncomfortably. The older scarred alien who had argued with her before stepped forward again. His jaw tight, he spoke in a low growl, his tone dripping with anger. The priestess listened without a flicker of fear. Jack's mind raced. She had saved him once, but why? And what was she telling them now? Her golden eyes occasionally flicked toward him, and each time they did, the crowd seemed to grow more restless. It was as if his very existence was a spark threatening to set the whole village aflame. Suddenly, her voice grew louder, almost like she was issuing a challenge. The crowd reacted. Some gasped, others shouted, and a few even laughed nervously. Jack didn't like the sound of it. The older alien pointed directly at him and spoke with a sneer. The priestess responded with a single short phrase that silenced him completely. Her presence was undeniable. She was not someone to be ignored. Then, something unexpected happened. She turned and walked toward Jack. The warriors moved aside, watching her as if they too were curious about what she would do. When she stood before him, she lowered her voice. "You live. If you pass," she whispered in broken English. Her accent was strange, every word heavy but deliberate. Jack frowned, confused. Pass what?" He whispered back, but she was already stepping away, speaking to the crowd again, from her gestures and the reaction of the aliens. Jack began to understand. She was proposing some sort of test, not an escape, not mercy, but a trial, and if he failed, the feast would continue, with him as the main course. The crowd erupted into a mix of cheers and arguments. The warriors' faces lit with a kind of excitement that made Jack's stomach twist. This was entertainment to them. The priestess stood tall in the center, her voice rising over the noise. Jack could see now she was fighting for him in her own way. Maybe she couldn't simply free him. Maybe she had to give them a reason not to kill him. One of the younger warriors approached with a knife. For a moment, Jack thought they were about to end it right there. But instead, the warrior cut the ropes binding his arms. The rough fibers fell away, leaving deep marks on his wrists. The crowd murmured, their glowing eyes fixed on him like predators studying prey. Jack rubbed his sore wrists, every muscle in his body ready to spring into action. But running was pointless. The jungle around the village was a wall of darkness, alive with strange, distant cries. The priestess stepped closer once more, her voice low so only he could hear. "Night hunt. Survive," she said, pressing something small and smooth into his palm. Jack glanced down. It was a stone, glowing faintly with a warm golden light. It pulsed gently, like a heartbeat. Before he could ask what it was, she turned and walked away, disappearing into the crowd. The scarred elder barked an order, and the warriors moved in. They formed a loose circle around Jack, prodding him toward the jungle's edge. The villagers followed, their footsteps crunching against the dry earth. The drums began again, faster now. Jack realized this was the beginning of his trial. Whatever it was, it would happen out there in the pitch-black wild. As he reached the tree line, he looked back one last time. The priestess stood apart from the others, her golden eyes glowing in the firelight. Her face was unreadable, but when their gazes met, Jack felt something pass between them, a silent promise. She had given him a chance. It might be his only one. With a final shove, he was sent into the darkness. The jungle swallowed him whole. The sounds of the village faded, replaced by the whispers and growls of unseen creatures. The glowing stone in his hand pulsed softly. Jack tightened his grip on it. If he was going to survive this, he'd have to trust the gift she had given him, and hope that the priestess's gamble was not the end of them both. A dangerous bargain. The jungle was a living thing. Its breath was the wind that rustled the giant leaves, and its heartbeat was the constant chirp hiss and growl of unseen creatures, Jack stood still for a moment, letting his eyes adjust to the darkness. The faint glow of the stone in his palm painted his fingers gold, casting just enough light to see a few steps ahead. He could still hear the drums from the village, distant now, a reminder of the crowd waiting for his failure somewhere. Out there, the golden-eyed priestess had risked her life to give him a chance, but her words replayed in his mind: night hunt. Survive. If this was a bargain, it was one with cruel rules. If he lived, maybe he'd walk free. If he failed, he would return to the fire, or not return at all. Jack began moving carefully through the undergrowth. The ground was uneven, tangled, with roots that grabbed at his boots. The stone's pulse quickened suddenly, and he froze. A low, rumbling growl came from somewhere ahead. Then two bright green eyes opened in the dark, far apart and much too high off the ground to belong to anything friendly. He crouched low, moving sideways, trying not to make a sound. The creature's shape emerged, a massive reptilian predator, its scales glistening faintly in the glow. It sniffed the air, catching his scent. The stone in his hand burned warm, as if warning him. Jack grabbed a thick branch from the ground and hurled it in the opposite direction. The sound made the creature turn, charging after the noise with surprising speed. Jack didn't wait. He slipped away deeper into the jungle, his heart hammering. Minutes passed, or maybe hours. Time had no meaning here. The jungle seemed endless, twisting him in circles. The glowing stone became his only guide, sometimes pulsing faster when danger was near, sometimes cooling when the path was safe, but every step felt like walking into another trap. Insects buzzed around him, and strange shapes slithered in the shadows. The air was thick and wet, sticking to his skin like a second layer. Then ahead, he saw something unexpected. Light, not the gold of his stone, but a flickering blue glow. He moved closer, pushing through thick vines. In a small clearing, he found an alien structure, half buried under roots and moss. It looked ancient, like it had been here for centuries. In the center stood a tall stone pillar covered in symbols that pulsed faintly. The same kind of symbols he had seen painted on the priestess's robes. Jack stepped closer, tracing one of the carvings with his fingers. The glowing stone in his hand reacted instantly, its light matching the pulse of the pillar. Suddenly, his vision blurred, and an image flashed in his mind. The priestess, standing before the tribe, holding the same kind of stone. Her voice speaking words he didn't understand, but somehow felt deep in his bones. It wasn't just a trial. It was part of something bigger, something sacred. A rustling sound snapped him back to reality. He turned to see two warriors from the village, their eyes glowing in the dark. They moved with predator-like silence, their spears tipped with jagged obsidian. Jack realized they were not here to watch. They were here to make sure he didn't succeed. The priestess had not told him about this part of the bargain. He backed away slowly, but one of the warriors lunged. Instinct took over. Jack ducked, grabbing a fallen branch and swinging it hard. The blow caught the warrior in the side, knocking him into the undergrowth. The other raised his spear, but Jack hurled the glowing stone at him. The moment it touched the warrior's chest, the man froze, his eyes wide. The stone flared bright, and the warrior stumbled back as if struck by an invisible force. Jack scrambled forward, snatching the stone from the ground. Both warriors retreated into the shadows, their eyes filled not with anger, but fear. Whatever the stone was, it had power the priestess must have known about. And now Jack was sure of one thing. This trial was not just about survival. It was about proving something, not just to the tribe, but to the priestess herself. He pressed the stone tightly in his hand and began moving again. The jungle seemed quieter now, but the sense of being watched never left. Somewhere above, unseen shapes followed him, their movements matching his. Every step forward brought him closer to dawn, and every step also brought him deeper into the bargain the priestess had made, a bargain that might cost them both everything. *The jungle of death. The jungle at night was not just dangerous, It was alive in ways Jack had never imagined. The air itself seemed to whisper, carrying the calls of unseen creatures, some shrill and sharp, others low and drawn out. The ground shifted beneath his boots as roots twisted like sleeping snakes. Every step forward felt like walking deeper into the throat of some giant beast. The glowing stone in his hand gave him comfort, its warm pulse steady against his palm. But it also reminded him that the priestess had placed him here on purpose. This was no random hunt. She had chosen the jungle as his trial, and if this place was truly her choice, then there had to be a reason. A sudden splash ahead made him freeze. Through the thick leaves, he saw a pool of dark water reflecting faint moonlight. The surface rippled, though there was no wind. He crouched low, scanning for movement. Then, without warning, something broke the surface. A head, wide and flat, with too many teeth crammed into its mouth. The thing's skin was black and wet, blending perfectly with the water. Its eyes caught the faint glow of his stone and locked onto him. Jack slowly stepped back, but the creature surged forward, its body sliding silently onto the mud. It moved like an eel, but as long as a car. The stone pulsed faster in his hand, warning him. He turned and ran, his boots slamming against the wet earth. Branches whipped his face, and thorned vines tore at his sleeves. Behind him, the sound of the thing slithering grew louder. It was fast, far too fast. He spotted a thick tree ahead with roots like a natural ladder. Without thinking, he leapt and climbed, gripping the rough bark as the creature lunged below. Its jaws snapped shut where his leg had been seconds earlier. It hissed, circling the base of the tree. Jack held his breath, his heart pounding so hard he thought it might give him away. After what felt like forever, the thing slid back toward the water, disappearing under the black surface without a sound. Jack climbed down slowly, every muscle trembling. The stone's pulse returned to normal. He didn't know if it was keeping him alive or leading him into more danger. But he knew one thing: without it, he'd already be dead. He pressed on. The jungle changing around him, the trees grew taller, their branches forming a roof that blocked out the moon. Strange plants glowed faintly in the shadows, some opening and closing like breathing mouths. A mist rolled in, curling around his legs. The air smelled sweet, almost pleasant, but it made his head feel heavy. He realized too late that the plants were releasing something into the air. His vision blurred, and the jungle seemed to tilt under his feet. Shadows twisted into shapes that weren't real, or maybe they were. He stumbled forward, gripping the stone tighter. The glow from it flared brighter, cutting through the haze in his mind. Slowly, the fog in his head began to lift. Whatever the stone was, it could fight off whatever poison the plants were releasing. The priestess must have known about this too, but as his senses cleared, he became aware of something else. He was not alone. Shapes moved in the mist, their outlines tall and thin. They weren't animals, they were warriors. Jack's stomach dropped. The tribe had sent hunters into the jungle to track him, and from the way they moved, they weren't here to watch. They were here to end the trial. He crouched low, slipping behind a thick tree. The hunters passed silently, their glowing eyes scanning the mist. They carried weapons shaped like curved bone, and their skin was painted in dull green patterns that made them blend into the jungle. Jack waited until they were far enough, then moved in the opposite direction. But the stone in his hand began to throb, not fast like danger, but slow and deep. It was guiding him somewhere. He followed its pull, weaving through the trees until he reached a clearing. In the center stood a massive stone statue, half buried in the earth. Its face was worn away by time, but its hands were cupped together, holding a bowl-shaped hollow. The stone in Jack's hand glowed brighter as he stepped closer. When he placed it in the statue's hands, the ground trembled, the bowl filled with a golden light, spilling over the jungle floor. For a moment, the mist rolled back, and the sounds of the predators faded. Jack stared at the glowing bowl, realizing this was no random trial. This was a place of power, a place the priestess had wanted him to Fine, but why give such a secret to an outsider? What did she expect him to do with it? Before he could think further, a sound broke the silence. The hunters were returning, and this time they had found his trail. The golden light had exposed him. He grabbed the stone from the statue, the light vanishing instantly. With the hunters closing in, Jack turned and ran deeper into the jungle. Whatever bargain the priestess had made, it was dragging him into something far more dangerous than he had ever imagined. The truth revealed. The jungle finally began to thin as the first light of dawn touched the treetops. Jack's legs ached and his throat burned from thirst. The golden stone in his hand had dimmed, its warm pulse now soft and slow. He had survived the night, but survival felt less like victory and more like stepping into another trap. As the trees gave way to an open clearing, he saw the village ahead. Smoke curled lazily from the fires, and the sound of morning drums echoed faintly. The hunters who had followed him were nowhere to be seen, but their absence didn't bring comfort. It made the air heavier. Jack knew they hadn't given up. They were simply waiting for the right moment. When he entered the village, the crowd gathered instantly. Whispers rippled through them like wind through dry leaves. Some pointed at him with wide eyes, as if they had just seen a ghost. Others frowned, their expressions dark and unreadable. The scarred elder pushed forward, his glare sharp enough to cut. He barked a few words, but before Jack could react, the golden-eyed priestess stepped out from the crowd. She moved toward him with slow, deliberate steps. Her robes were different now, darker, embroidered with new symbols that shimmered like sunlight on water. The crowd fell silent as she stopped in front of him. Her gaze locked with his, and for a long moment neither of them spoke. Finally she reached out and touched the glowing stone in his hand. Her fingers were warm, and her voice was soft but steady. "You found it," she said in broken English. Jack blinked in surprise. You planned this?" he asked. The priestess didn't answer immediately. Instead, she turned to the crowd and began to speak in her own language. Her words rolled like waves, calm, then rising in power. The villagers shifted, their eyes darting between her and Jack. Some looked fearful, others intrigued. Jack couldn't understand the details, but the tone was clear. She was telling them something important. Then she gestured toward him, all eyes fixed on him. He could feel their stares pressing into his skin. The priestess stepped closer, her voice low so only he could hear. "Our leaders lie," she said, each word sharp and certain. "They say humans, dangerous, must be killed. But truth is different." Jack's pulse quickened. "Why tell me this? Why save me?" he asked. She glanced at the scarred elder, who was glaring at her like a predator ready to strike. "Because I see," she whispered. "I know, you're people, not enemy." But hope, her words sank deep into him. It wasn't just about him surviving. She had used the trial to prove something to her people. That a human could face the jungle, the dangers, even the hunters, and still live. That strength didn't always mean killing. The scarred elder suddenly stepped forward, shouting angrily. The crowd stirred, voices rising. The priestess lifted her chin and answered him with steel in her voice. Jack could feel the tension crackling like lightning. This was no simple argument. It was a battle for the tribe's belief. The elder pointed at Jack's stone and demanded something. The priestess refused, her voice cutting through his like a blade. Jack didn't need to understand the words. He knew she wasn't going to give it up. The stone wasn't just a tool, it was a symbol, and in the wrong hands, it could keep the tribe trapped in fear for generations. Suddenly, the elder barked an order. 2 warriors moved forward, spears raised. Jack stepped back instinctively, but the priestess moved in front of him. Her voice rang out, loud and unshakable. The warriors froze, uncertainty flickering in their glowing eyes. The crowd murmured again, torn between 2 leaders. Jack leaned toward her, speaking fast. "If they come for you, you can't fight them all," he said. She looked at him, her eyes bright with something fierce. "I will not fight," she replied. "I will change. The scarred elder snarled and turned away, disappearing into the crowd. The villagers slowly began to disperse, but their glances lingered on Jack and the priestess. Whatever had just happened was far from over. Jack could feel it in the air. The tribe was split, and he was standing in the center of that fracture. When the crowd was gone, the priestess led him toward a small hut at the edge of the village. Inside, it was quiet and dim. She motioned for him to sit and began tracing the same glowing symbols from the jungle statue onto the dirt floor. "These," she said, "are truth." She pointed at the stone in his hand. "You carry proof." Jack stared at the markings, realizing the jungle trial had been more than survival. It had been a message, a way to show the people that fear could be broken. But the elder wasn't going to let that happen easily. Jack knew the next move wouldn't be in the jungle, it would be here, among the tribe, and it might be even more dangerous. The rebellion. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows across the village. Jack could feel the shift in the air, a silent tension wrapping around the place like a tightening rope. Since the trial, whispers had followed him wherever he went. Some villagers looked at him with curiosity, others with open hostility. But it wasn't just him they were watching, it was the priestess. She walked through the village with her head high, her golden eyes never wavering, even as the scarred elder's followers glared from the shadows. Jack had learned that the elder held the real power here. The priestess's position gave her influence, but the warriors answered to him, and that meant the danger wasn't over. It was only beginning that night. The priestess led Jack to a hidden clearing on the edge of the jungle. There, in the faint moonlight, a small group waited. Men and women of the tribe, their robes marked with the same glowing symbols Jack had seen on the jungle statue. "These, my people," she said softly. "They believe what I believe." One by one, the figures stepped forward, touching Jack's shoulder in silent greeting. Their eyes held no fear, only determination. The priestess knelt and drew a symbol in the dirt, a circle with a line through it. "This is change," she explained. "Tomorrow, great feast. Elder will speak. We'll make you enemy again." Jack frowned. "So he's going to use the feast to turn them against us?" he asked. She nodded slowly. "But we will speak first," she said, her voice low but fierce. "We will show truth before lies." They spent the rest of the night planning. The priestess's allies moved quietly through the village, leaving small marks on doors, signals to those who could be trusted. Jack helped by crafting a rough display from sticks and vines, a frame to hold the golden stone so all could see its glow. It would be the proof they needed, but proof alone wouldn't win. They would have to make the people feel it. By dawn, the plan was set. The feast would be held in the central square, a massive fire burning at its heart. The elder would stand before the people and speak of tradition, fear, and the dangers of outsiders. The priestess would interrupt with her truth, using the stone to show the ancient power that had been hidden, and Jack would stand at her side, not as a prisoner, but as living proof of survival. The day passed in uneasy silence. Jack noticed the elder's warriors sharpening their weapons, their eyes following him wherever he went. The priestess moved calmly, but Jack could see the tightness in her jaw. They were both gambling everything on one moment. When night came, the drums began. The villagers gathered in a wide circle around the fire. The elder stepped forward, his voice booming as he spoke. Even without knowing the words, Jack could feel the venom in them. The crowd nodded, some clapping in agreement. The priestess stood at the edge, waiting for her moment. When the elder paused, she stepped forward. The crowd murmured, the firelight catching on her golden eyes. She raised her hands and began to speak, her voice calm but carrying power. The elder barked something at her, but she didn't stop. Instead, she pointed at Jack, then at the stone in his hand. Slowly, Jack stepped into the firelight, holding it high. The golden glow spilled across the faces of the crowd. Gasps rose as the light grew brighter. Some stepped back, shielding their eyes. The priestess's voice rose, her words quick and urgent. Jack didn't understand the language, but he understood the effect. The crowd was shifting, their eyes moving from fear to wonder. The elder roared, calling his warriors forward. They pushed through the crowd, but the priestess's allies moved to block them. The air filled with shouting. The fire crackled high. Jack could feel the moment tipping. One wrong move and blood would spill. He turned, holding the stone toward the people. "This is the truth," he shouted. "They've been lying to you." The words meant nothing to most of them, but his tone, his stance, and the glowing light carried more weight than language. The priestess stepped beside him, her hand on the stone, speaking to the people with a voice that shook the air. The crowd leaned forward, listening. Even the warriors hesitated, their spears lowering slightly. The elder saw his control slipping. With a snarl, he reached for his weapon, but before he could raise it, two of the priestess's allies stepped forward, holding their own spears across his chest. The crowd erupted in noise, not fear this time, but defiance. The elder's power was breaking. The priestess turned to Jack, her eyes fierce. "This only start," she said. Jack nodded, gripping the stone tighter. The rebellion had begun, and now there was no turning back. The turning of the fire roared in the center of the village, its flames twisting like golden snakes against the dark sky. The heat shimmered in the air, carrying with it the sound of voices, not chanting in fear, but shouting in defiance. Jack stood with the priestess at his side, the golden stone glowing in his hand. Before them, the scarred elder stood rigid, his face dark with fury. The crowd had broken into two halves. One side clung to the old ways, their eyes locked on the elder with loyalty. The other side, drawn by the priestess's words and the light of the stone, stood ready for change. Jack could feel the tension stretching thin, one spark away from chaos. The elder raised his voice, booming across the square. He pointed at Jack, spitting venom in his language. Jack didn't need to understand the words. The meaning was clear. The elder wanted fear back, fear of the outsider, fear of change. The priestess stepped forward, her golden eyes glowing brighter than the fire. Her voice cut through his like a blade, sharp and sure. She spoke to the people, her words steady, each one landing like the strike of a drum. Jack watched as heads began to turn toward her. Even those who had stood behind the elder now wavered. The elder snarled, reaching for the ceremonial spear strapped to his back. The crowd shifted, some stepping away. The priestess didn't move. Instead, she reached for Jack's hand, her fingers closing over the stone. The glow intensified, spilling across the square. Gasps rose from the people as the light touched them. It wasn't just brightness, it was warmth, a strange calm settling over the crowd. The elder roared and charged. Jack moved on instinct, stepping between him and the priestess. The spear came down, but Jack caught the shaft with both hands. The impact rattled his bones, but he held firm. The elder pushed forward, his strength immense. Jack gritted his teeth, shoving back with every ounce of will he had left. The stone in his hand pulsed once, hard. A shock of golden light burst between them. The elder stumbled back, his eyes wide with shock. The crowd cried out, not in fear this time, but in awe. The priestess's voice rose again, calling out a single word that echoed across the square. It was a word of judgment, and the people answered, their voices joining hers. The elder's own warriors hesitated, their loyalty breaking under the weight of the moment. One by one, they lowered their weapons. Some even stepped back into the crowd. The elder looked around, seeing his power crumble. The firelight showed not victory in his eyes, but desperation. With a final snarl, he turned to flee, but two of the priestess's allies stepped forward, blocking his path. The crowd closed in, their voices rising in a chant. The old order was gone. The priestess had won. She turned to Jack, her golden eyes soft now. "You live." "We live," she said quietly. Jack felt the weight of the past night lift from his shoulders. It wasn't just survival anymore. It was a beginning. The tribe had seen the truth. and the fire that once promised his death now burned for celebration. The villagers began to dance around the flames, their chants no longer filled with fear but with joy. The golden stone still glowed in Jack's hand. He glanced at the priestess. "What happens now?" he asked. She smiled faintly. "Now we make new path," she said, "together." Jack looked around at the faces, some still unsure, others smiling. He knew the elder's shadow might linger. Change was never instant, but tonight the first step had been taken. The priestess raised her hand, calling the people to gather. She spoke of the jungle, the trial, and the truth the golden stone had revealed. She spoke of courage, not fear, of unity, not division, and when she finished, the crowd cheered. Their voices rose with the crackle of the fire, carrying far into the night. Jack stood beside her, the light of the flames and the glow of the stone reflecting in his eyes. For the first time since he had woken tied to that pole, he felt more than just alive. He felt part of something greater. The night was no longer a cage, it was a horizon, and somewhere beyond it, a future waited. A future they would shape together.